Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. If you've seen any of my recent lectures, you will know that it is my hypothesis that a group or groups who control the UK government, the Crown and the media are running a very subtle yet highly damaging subversion and demoralisation campaign against the general public and are using a range of techniques. If you want more explanation on this, please follow these links to lectures where it is all explained. Now, I'm running another subversion survey and I would like you to help me with it. The two areas I am seeking to expose are confusion and antagonism. Sometimes they are linked in that confusion can lead to antagonism. Let's deal with confusion first. It is my belief that the strategy of confusing the public is being used all the time. This works by first implanting certain beliefs or understanding in the public mindset over a certain period of time. This might be days or even years. Beliefs can be implanted through media stories, documentaries, reality TV, music, and many other genres. At some point, information is directed to the public which completely contradicts or causes conflict and imbalance with the initial implanted belief. This then creates confusion. Sometimes the strategy is for the confusion to lead to conflict, not just within the individual's mind, but between individuals or between groups of individuals. The issues or areas that conflict is being created over could be serious issues, mind-bogglingly trivial issues, or completely manufactured issues. There may be more than two belief positions being promulgated. I want you to tell me if you recognize what I am talking about, and tell me what the area is and through what medium the confusion is being spread. Email me at confusion@richplanet.net with your suggestions and observations. Many people think that mixed messages put out in our media is just part of the randomness of opinion and results from freedom of expression. I would beg to differ and suggest that confusion is a key part of the agenda and subjects are deliberately polarized. I suspect that in some cases the creation of confusion is done for a very specific singular reason, whereas in other cases it is for a more generic agenda, simply to create people with heads full of shit. The second part of the subversion survey is to report on strategies being used to create antagonism within society. Antagonism is created again by managing people's beliefs. There are many ways this is being done, but one method is to create prejudice or cause existing prejudice to be grossly exaggerated by making people feel hard done to. This can be done by, on the one hand, using propaganda to make people desire or covet what they don't have and probably will never have, and at the same time in some other propaganda portraying undeserving people being unjustly rewarded. Once you are antagonized, your thinking becomes primitive and your behavior is then much more easily manipulated. Reach for the pitchfork. If you want to report strategies being used to increase levels of antagonism, email me at antagonism@richplanet.net. I will draw up league tables for the top of the pops of both confusion and antagonism. Over recent months, I have been investigating more animal mutilation incidents. Those who are not familiar with this phenomenon, you can get up to speed via these links. Since 2015, there have been a number of horse mutilation incidents in the UK, at least 6 cases that I know of. One of the injuries on the horses that keeps turning up is very peculiar. In 2010, along with David Caton, I reported on a case in East Sussex. The animal had had its chestnuts surgically removed. Chestnuts are small, redundant lumps on horses' legs, which are thought to correspond to the wrist pad of dogs, although I think there is some contention over this point. Horses sometimes have them trimmed because they can look unsightly. Here's a clip from the 2010 documentary. It is safe to say that the mainstream media's coverage of this event is totally assumptive and not based on any of the facts. They are drawing premature conclusions based on the limited information that the police have decided to give them. A knife attack. This was not the opinion of animal mutilation expert David Caton. And the owner is keen to have a post-mortem done.
Yes, the horse owner is keen, yes. The chestnuts, which is sort of redundant
part of the horse.
Throwback of the horse, which is on the inside of the leg above the knee, and all four have been removed. Yeah.
And these are just little sort of £2 coin-sized lumps on horses' legs called chestnuts.
Yes.
And they've all been cut off.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that, David? Why?
No, I'm mystified by that. I mean, it's a new one on us. We've never known of that before.
Okay, that was in 2010. The extremely bizarre thing is that 2 of the recent horse mutilation cases, which were in an entirely different part of the UK, also had all 4 chestnuts excised. Here's a recent clip from one of those cases. And there's no obvious cause of death because the chestnut removal and the ear would not cause it to die, so something's killed it.
No, that's like you said. It's interesting to know how the horse has been put down.
So at least 3 horses that we know of that have been killed and mutilated in the UK have had all 4 chestnuts excised. In all cases, there was no sign of the chestnuts, so in each case the perpetrator has taken them. I hope to report in much more detail on the recent cases in my upcoming lecture tour, but I'd like to throw this out to viewers to give me your theories on why someone or something would need to excise the chestnuts from horses. We are baffled. Now, about 4 years ago, I went to a small observatory on top of a hill in a remote part of Wales called the Space Guard Centre. An observatory which claims to be searching for near-Earth objects which might pose a threat to humanity. I've been given information by a particular researcher who claims this observatory could actually be being used as an observation post for animal mutilation cases, and the NEO, or Near-Earth Object story, could just be a cover. Apparently there have been many animal mutilation cases in that area. I went along to the observatory one day when it was closed to the public. In the grounds, there is what looks like an ancient stone circle, but it was actually built in 1997 and intriguingly is called the Diana Circle. Telescope dome, which I think is a 24-inch refractor, and it overlooks these valleys. Just gonna have a look at the stone circle. On one of the stones, we read Diana's stone circle, built in the year 1997. Right, good. Some of them have got astrological symbols on them. There's the one on this stone circle. If I turn around 180 degrees, on the other side there's a circle, a circle with a hole in it exactly the same. And so there's one at 12 o'clock, if you like, one at 6 o'clock, and then there's one at 90 degrees to that over there. So there's 4. So that's about half an inch, but the hole is it's getting on for 2 inches. The depth of that hole, and I would say it's about maybe half an inch in diameter, which are all sort of pointing towards this ball. On one of the stones, there's holes going right the way through it. The question is, does this stone circle have function as well as form? That's the question. What are these holes for? Are they just decoration? I wonder if it's attached to a huge Van de Graaff generator underneath and maybe charges up and then floats off at night. It's very Bob Lazar. Perhaps there is an obvious explanation for these small holes within the stones. If you know of one, please let me know. Earlier this year I gave a lecture at Holmfirth, the home of Nora Batty, at the annual UFO Truth Conference hosted by Gary Heseltine and Larry Warren. I will be screening the talk on the rest of today's show, which is continued on next week's show.
Richard D. Hall, the new dad, in order.
Thank you, Larry and Gary. It's been quite a year for me because not only do I have a son, but I also lost my father. So I guess that makes me the boss now. Okay, so I'm going to put a rating on today's talk. Today's talk is rated PG. That's because there is some mild swear words in there and some animal mutilation images. So just put that warning on it first. So it's great to be here in the hometown of Nora Batty and Gary Heseltine. I don't mean at the same time, right? Okay, now what are we going to learn today in my talk? Well, I've tried to summarize it in one phrase. This is what we're going to learn today. If you accept information without evidence, expect shit. Now then, I've made a number of films over the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm just going to go through them just to start off today's lecture before we get into the core of what I'm going to talk about. In 2009, I made a film called The Gateshead Grey. Now this was a story of a chap who alleged that in 1940 he witnessed a flying saucer, or it was an egg-shaped craft, land in his street, and he alleges that he was taken on board it, that he was examined. Incredible story, and this was a very popular film. Now Gary Heseltine actually wrote a detailed précis of this case before I made this film, and that was one of the things that inspired me to make the film, because Robert Hall lived within a few miles of where I lived, and my quest in that film was to try and find corroborating evidence to back up what he was saying, which wasn't easy considering it happened in 1940, but everything that he said that I could verify from independent sources was true. So he's either the best fabricator in the world, or there's something true about this case. Then in 2009 I made a film with David Caton, you saw him earlier today, called Silent Killers, and this charts the work, much of the work of David Caton and the Animal Pathology Field Unit. Then in 2010 I thought I would tackle the crop circle mystery, but not really in a way that most people have tackled it thus far, because what I did in my film, I exposed the circle makers. So this chap here, John Lundberg, I provided what I would say is a vast amount of circumstantial evidence suggesting that he was linked to MI5, a lot of evidence. You might ask the question, well, why the hell does MI5 sponsor and fund the crop circle phenomenon? Well, it's all to do with the muddle up and the cover up. Because as David Caton said earlier on, to find a genuine crop circle now is nigh on impossible. And that's because the subject has been disinformed by the likes of John Lundberg, making hundreds of crop circles every year, while he himself, 1992 was when he started making them, but there were people before him who I suspect were also linked to MI5. So to me, the actual truth behind the crop circle mystery, there's something really important that they do not want people to know about, in my opinion, with this. I then made a film at very short notice, because I got a telephone call from somebody who'd had a horse mutilation case turn up on their land. So I jumped in the car, picked David Caton up in Manchester, and we went down and we made a full hour-long documentary about this poor horse Rascal. And you can see here the classic jaw strip incision. Now, we've just had a case very similar to this case turn up less than 2 weeks ago in Leicestershire. Here's the news article here. It says, horse killed in barbaric blade attack in Syston. And of course, the media always get it wrong. It's not a barbaric blade attack. Now, I've been in touch with the owner of this horse. I've spoken to her at length, and she's given me quite a lot of details. And she's been getting the usual runaround from the authorities. There was indecision over whether this horse was going to get sent for post-mortem. Eventually they decided that it needed a post-mortem. But the woman who owns the horse thought she would get a copy of that post-mortem on the afternoon that it was done. Normally it would only take a few hours. And I think she's still waiting. And this article is the 8th of September. So it could be the same as what happened in the East Sussex case, where the owner was never given a copy of the post-mortem. But the people carrying out the post-mortem on this case, they did let a few things slip to the horse owner on the phone, and we've managed to establish certain facts about the case. The first interesting thing was that this horse had all 4 of its chestnuts removed. Now, chestnuts are these lumps on the side of an animal's leg, and strangely, the case in East Sussex, also all the chestnuts were removed. We also had the classic jaw strip, and we also had the ear excised. So there's some clear similarities. Same age as well, it's a 2-year-old horse. Now in this case, I'm just gonna, because I got some high definition images off the owner of this horse. This is just 2 hours drive from here, less than 2 weeks ago. Now we can see there the incision, which is very interesting because the pathologist carrying out the post-mortem actually said that there was massive trauma to the neck, which you can actually see here, okay? So that's internal. Now, if that trauma was penetrating trauma rather than blunt trauma, what it means is that this hole here has probably been used to extract tissue or organs from the inside of the neck, which is why there's trauma within there. And they said, we can't understand this trauma, so we're going to send it for a CT scan. And this woman has not received a copy of the post-mortem. So here's a closer-up image of that hole. Now, I'm just going to read you, David Caton did a very rough preliminary report on this, and I'm just going to read a little extract from it. It says, I think it is possible that the 5-inch diameter hole about the right ear was cut primarily to facilitate extraction of a number of neck organs further down the neck. There are 2 closely spaced, deeper-looking cavities within this incision. Maybe the unknown organs have been withdrawn via these cavities. Now, if that's the case, and if the trauma in the neck was penetrating trauma, that means these organs have been removed while this animal was still alive. And all we get in our media is that it's just some nutter with a knife attack. You're not going to find this in our mainstream media. Okay. Now, the next film I made was called The Berwyn UFO Cover-Up Exposed, sometimes referred to as the Welsh Roswell. Now, probably Britain's second most famous UFO case after Rendlesham. This is Scott Felton, who tirelessly investigated this case for years and years. On the left there's an artist's impression of this 15-meter diameter sphere which came down gradually and landed on the side of the mountain and stayed there for over an hour. Now, the other aspect of this case was that sometime before this object landed, there was another object crash landed. Now, the British Geological Survey have tried to muddle up this case and say there was an earthquake. There was definitely no earthquake in the Berwyn Mountain case. Something crash landed. People even saw the thing coming down before it crash landed. There was a massive earth tremor, and then mysteriously this object came and sat on the side of the mountain. No one knows what it was. I don't know whether it's terrestrial or extraterrestrial. But what I do know is that our government have been trying to cover this up since 1974. Right, because the army, the military, were there within half an hour, and this is an extremely remote part of North Wales. So that suggests foreknowledge. I think that the military knew this was going to happen. You can see in the artist's impression there, that's torchlights going towards the object of the military. Now, Scott Felton here, he took part in a documentary in 2008 for Channel 5. He spent a whole day with the documentary team. And right at the last minute, the producer of the documentary was told, you've got to cut out all of Scott Felton's contribution to that documentary. So there's definitely been a cover-up on this case. But if you want to find the facts about the case, it's all in my film, The Berwyn UFO Cover-Up Exposed. All right, then in 2012, I investigated some very interesting UFO sightings in North East Lincolnshire, which has now become known as the Lincolnshire Triangle. Various different types of UFO have been seen there, and in addition I was intrigued because right next to where all this activity had been going on for about 4 or 5 years, there was one of Britain's biggest ever sheep rustling incidents. So 1,500 sheep allegedly went missing overnight. So my my hypothesis was perhaps the two are linked. And I made a film all about this in 2012, and I'm going to talk about further missing sheep cases that have happened in Lincolnshire today. Alright, the next film that I made was called Almost Identified Flying Objects, which predominantly covered cases of football pitch-sized flying triangles, many of them over the UK. I gathered lots and lots of witness testimonies, but also in Belgium and in other parts of the world. And the fundamental argument of this film was not, hey, we're being visited by ETs, but it was, these objects are definitely in our skies and they're unacknowledged by our visible government. It's fact, absolute fact. I don't know who's piloting these things, but I think our government should be concerned about them and they should be investigating them, because they're definitely there. But they always try and push the argument onto, ooh, is it an ET craft or is it man-made? That's really not the argument at this point. The argument is they are definitely there. Nobody can deny that. So why aren't MPs discussing this in Parliament? All of these sightings of completely silent football pitch-sized black triangles. So there's a cover-up on this issue without any question. Now the next film I made was a very dark film called UFOs and NATO, which continued on from the work of animal mutilation, and it really centered around the testimony of a black ops soldier who contacted someone called Derek Goff in 1997 and gave him information on a unit that he was in, which was used to clean up after human mutilation cases and recover those bodies and make sure that they were never seen by the public or the authorities. He alleges that the team he was in was led by a NATO group and that he was hand-picked for this particular operation. Now, what I did was I wanted to try and speak to this military person myself, because only Derek Goff and Tony Dodd had spoken to this guy. So I wanted to get to the source, and it took me quite a while. It took me 2 years of sweet talking Derek Goff to get the guy's name and address, and then it took me well, quite a bit of Dutch courage to go and knock on the guy's door, but eventually I got to speak to him and I met with him 5 times, and all of the disclosures from this are in this film. This is a reconstruction of 2 bodies of a young man and a young woman which were allegedly found. I think I've traced it because I think I've got a corroborating newspaper article in 1990, August 1990, on the Brecon Beacons. Okay, now I then decided to have a diversion from the subject of UFOs because I wanted to make a film which would really attack our woeful mainstream media. And I don't think UFOs is the best subject to attack the mainstream media on, and neither is 9/11 and other subjects. But the subject of Madeleine McCann, I thought was the best sort of Achilles heel, if you like, in the establishment media machine, because there's not a person on this planet doesn't know who that little girl is. And if you research the case, it becomes blatantly obvious that this is another cover-up. So I went out to Portugal, I investigated the case, I spoke to a lot of people, and I made this 4-hour documentary which reveals the true story of Madeleine McCann. In 2015, I also made a film about a lone gunman incident which I smelt a rat on from day one. This was a taxi driver, perfectly peaceful taxi driver, no background of violence whatsoever, gets out of his bed on a glorious summer's day and he goes and shoots 12 people cold-blooded murder of 12 people, driving around in his car, shooting them supposedly at random. Now I've uncovered evidence in this film that there was at least one other gunman, right? And I do think, based on a lot of the witness statements, because I've spoken to a lot of witnesses in this case, that he was under some form of mind control. Okay, but I'm always drawn back to this subject of ufology, and I'm going to give you the reason why. The reason why I'm always drawn back to this subject is because I believe this subject can provide the answer to the question of what is man's true genetic and spiritual origin. What are we doing on this planet? How do we get to be here on this tiny planet? What is the real sequence of events which brought the human race to inhabit this planet? And this subject, I think, is the only subject which can shed light on that question. And you've got to admit that's the biggest question that we face. Where did we come from? Because the 2 usual avenues that people go to try and find answers to that question are science and religion. Now, if you consider science, science has handcuffed itself to this flawed theory of evolution. If you operate in a scientific field, you're not allowed to talk about human origins unless your theory fits nice and snugly with Darwinian evolution. And I think that theory has got holes all over it. If you look at religion, well, religions have been rewritten by human beings for the agendas of human beings. And that's the reason why I don't think religion can provide the answer. But ufology is an extremely open-minded subject. And I don't think I have to tell the people in this audience why this subject can possibly bring about answers to those really important questions, the ancient astronaut theories and things like that. And one person who's written about and spoken about human origins for a big part of his life was Lloyd Pye. Now, I was fortunate enough to meet and interview Lloyd Pye in 2010. This is a photograph from an interview which we did. And Lloyd Pye, just in a nutshell, he believes that around about 200,000 years ago, someone or something was carrying out genetic engineering on this planet, and we are a result of that, and other species as well. So I'm just going to show you a brief clip from the last part of this interview. And if and when this is accepted by mainstream, what's going to change on our planet?
Everything. Everything. I think that when disclosure, I think that right now you and I have lived in what's called the post-war era. I think that World War II was a defining time, and everything since then has been called post-war. Right. I think that the next big phase of existence for all of us is going to be post-disclosure, because it's going to lift everybody's game to a very different and higher level, because when we start accepting that we're not the only game in town, it will, I think, develop some humility in us. We'll just have to become a little bit more humble about our origins, and it will just create a different mindset from which I think a lot of good things can happen.
All right then, Lloyd. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Richard, for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we do it again sometime.
Okay. Yeah, we need to accept we're not the only game in town, and we need to be a little bit more humble about our origins. I couldn't agree with him more. And you notice he said there, I hope we do it again sometime. I went to London 2 years ago, and I read Lloyd Pye's latest book, and Lloyd and I exchanged a lot of emails planning 3 lengthy interviews about his life's work. And I'd set up a little studio in the hotel to do the interviews with Lloyd, but he was too ill, he couldn't do it. And then 6 weeks later, he was dead. And I asked the question, was Lloyd Pye getting too close to the truth? I wonder. All right, now I'm going to ask the question, why might governments or their agencies be interested in, monitor, infiltrate, control, and even lead UFO research groups? Well, I can give 2 possible answers to that question. The first is to do with belief systems. What do I mean by belief systems? Well, your beliefs very much control your actions. Governments are very interested in controlling people's actions. If I told you lot, and you all believe me, that there was a UFO hovering outside this conference, I think most of you, along with me, would run outside and try and film it. So you're acting on a belief, right? So your beliefs very much determine your actions. Governments, we know, they want to control people, they want to control their actions. And they can do that by managing people's beliefs. Now, if you think about, let's say, belief systems of the past, religions. All religions talk about a creator, and that creator created the earth and created man. Now, if that creator created the earth, it means the creator is not from earth. So by very definition, the creator is an extraterrestrial. Now compare that to some of the theories in ufology. It's very, very similar. Many people think that we've been visited by extraterrestrials, and that they've had a hand in perhaps not just mankind, but in also the whole ecology and evolution of the planet. So you can see how ufology is a belief system. And I don't think any government would leave a belief system like ufology to flourish on its own and find its own path. They want to have control of it, right? And that's why I think all of this is going on, right? The other reason why I think governments or their agencies might want to do all of this with UFO research groups is to do with sequestered technology. And we've got Stanton Friedman here today, probably one of the world's experts in that subject. I'm sure he's going to talk about Roswell at some point. But it's not just, say, crash retrievals that the government or US government has sequestered information and technology from. It's perhaps contact cases, people who've had contact, or even physical evidence, such as implants. And all of that kind of evidence is discussed at events like this. And the government, I know most people on the street don't realize it, but they're very interested in leading and being part of these groups. All right. Now, I spoke about animal mutilation, and there's been, in the past, there have been a few cases where people swear that animal disappearance cases are linked to UFOs. So there was the Alan Godfrey case. When Alan Godfrey was abducted in 1980, he was actually investigating a case of some cows that had somehow gone from a field and were in the middle of a housing estate. And then they went from the housing estate to another rugby pitch behind locked gates, right? And that happened on the same night he was abducted. So you can understand why people think that whatever happened to that herd of cows was related to the UFO. We've had cases in Riverston Farm where 158 cattle were allegedly locked in a shed. The farmer goes to make a cup of tea, the phone rings when he gets to the farmhouse, and all of his 158 cattle are in a field up the road. It's the other farmer saying, "What are your cows doing in my field?" He said, "No, they're in the shed." He said, "No, they're not, they're in the field." So he went back and they were gone, allegedly. I wasn't there. So now I became aware of this case in Lincolnshire of 1,500 sheep that supposedly have gone like this in one night. And it's right next to a case of very high UFO activity. So in 2012, I went to investigate this, and there's been 2 more cases in Lincolnshire in the same rough area. Right, one of 600 sheep and another of 300 sheep and 120 cattle. So I've been investigating this summer, and the rest of today's talk is about those investigations. But whatever evidence you find, you must go with that evidence. And if it doesn't point to something UFO, you must report it. Okay, so let's just mention this case, 1,500 sheep, Britain's biggest ever alleged sheep rustling incident in September 2011. So this is the article where I first found out about it on the BBC website. It says, "Sheep stolen from Stenagott for illegal abattoirs. Police believe almost 1,500 sheep stolen in Lincolnshire may have been taken to unlicensed abattoirs. The sheep were taken from a 40-acre field in Stenagott near Louth between 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday morning. Detective Constable Nick Jones said the theft would have involved several people and 2 livestock transporters. There were 579 ewes and 901 lambs in the field, estimated to be worth £100,000 when the theft took place." All right, now before I give you some more details on that actual sheep disappearance case, I'm going to run through what some of the UFO activity in Lincolnshire. It's actually North East Lincolnshire. Now this is quite a sparsely populated area with slightly undulating hills, and it's a coastal area, and a lot of the UFOs have been seen in or near the coast. So this is a map of the area centered around a town called Louth, and the other towns and villages of significance are Mablethorpe, Alford, and also North Somercotes. So this is an article, this is the local newspaper. This is not a UFO site, it's a local newspaper. And I do find that occasionally local newspapers are better than national newspapers at covering this subject. So this is the 29th of October 2008. After reading the leader's story on Mr. Goring's extraordinary claims last week, a local UFO investigator has been to the village to scan the skies himself. The man, who asked not to be named, said, "I can now report I have been to Brink Hill twice, and on both occasions myself and a friend have seen the objects. I must say they are as Mr. Goring described. I saw 3 objects with lights on each point of the triangle with a large central light. The larger object flew within 100 feet of my car, and we experienced total electrical mayhem, and I felt charged with static. The objects are definitely not the Aurora Black Project plane, because it uses pulse scramjet engines, and these were silent, and we estimated they covered the distance from the coast to the Wolds in around a second, and that's not possible even for the Aurora." Now the next incident I'm going to tell you about occurred in January 2009. I'm sure you've all heard of it. This occurred at a place called North Somercotes, where there's quite a large wind turbine place, where an object is alleged to have struck a wind turbine and actually caused the blade to fall off. I'm going to show you a clip, a mainstream media clip first, and then I'm going to show you some more statements.
People who live nearby say that it was hit by a UFO. Residents remember being woken in the early hours of Sunday morning by a huge crash. When the sun came up, one of the turbines was bent and broken. That came after several witnesses reported glowing spheres in the sky earlier the same night.
I just suddenly saw this light appear in front of us, and it just seemed to whiz sort of across the sky towards the wind turbines. I said, there was 2 or 3 of us in the car, and I just said to the other 2, what was that?
Several other people claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky, and one person even reported seeing an explosion.
Lights appeared first of all, and it wasn't, according to various locals you speak to, it wasn't just one kind of light. There were lots of different lights. There was a small light, says a county councillor. No, says another motorist. It was a massive light with tentacles hanging down, and it was all over these wind turbines, and then look what they woke up to.
I saw a light. I was travelling from North Somercotes to South Somercotes towards Louth. There was a light, a static light, which was over the wind turbines. It was white with a slight reddish surround. And as the car moved, the light seemed to move with us. Whether this was an illusion, I do not know. But as we turned the corner, the light seemed to turn the corner and then disappear.
And then the next thing you find out is that wind turbine has been damaged.
I've just zoomed right in there so you can see the join where the blade joins the main rotating body. And they look pretty mechanically sound to me. If one of these blades just came off due to mechanical failure, I can't imagine it travelling very far. No more than a few hundred feet. And apparently it took them a while to find the missing blade, so I've heard.
Now let's just clear this up about this missing blade. I was contacted by a guy whose friend worked in the health and safety in Lincolnshire Council, who was one of the first on the scene, and he says the blade was not there. Right? Now if you go back and look at media reports, the first media reports all say the blade is missing, mystery of the missing blade. Then the following day they all say, they found the blade and it's been whisked off for testing. Now I think the guy at the health and safety was probably correct, because I have not seen any photograph of that recovered blade. Right? You've got Sky News reporters there, and there was other news reporters there covering that case. If they've found that blade, right, which was one of the main mysteries of the story, why hasn't it appeared in any newspaper, a photograph of it? Has anyone seen a photograph of the missing blade on that turbine? Anyone? No. And the mainstream media tried to say, it's been sent off for testing, and publications like Fortune Times tried to say, it's mechanical failure. This is a 65-foot blade. 65 foot? And they, walking around the fields, they can't find a 65-foot blade from a wind turbine. Come on, give me a break. Speculation has continued amongst residents in Conisholm and the surrounding villages, with some saying they saw strange flashing tentacle-shaped lights. Now remember that, strange flashing tentacle-shaped lights above the wind farm on the night before it happened. Mr. John Harrison of Salt Fleetby described how on Saturday night, January the 3rd, he looked out of his landing window to see a massive ball of light with tentacles going right down to the ground over Conisholm wind farm. More eyewitnesses have come forward after speculation of a UFO hitting a wind farm turbine. Scores of witnesses have come forward to tell us their weird encounters over the past weeks. New eyewitnesses. Rebecca Hodgson of Louth was at her horse's stables off London Road, Louth, Saturday, January 3rd, the night before the 65-foot blade fell from the turbine in Conisholm, when her horse was spooked by a flashing orange ball in the sky. Rebecca described how her horse stopped suddenly and gazed up at the sky as a bright orange light circled above the turbines. She said, "It was really bright and glowing. It went dimmer and then moved horizontally across the sky." Now, we had a typical mainstream media response, Mail Online, saying unmanned stealth bomber could have been UFO responsible for destroying a wind turbine. The source of this article isn't named, so we can't go and speak to them. Now, does this fit what witnesses have been describing? I don't think so. So what all this article tells me is that they're trying to cover up something that really did happen. Now, further local media reports came in after this wind turbine incident into the local press. This article is all about what they were now calling the mysterious Lincolnshire Triangle being a UFO hotspot. And Red Diamond UFO, this is July 2009, the same year, again, North Somercourts. Mablethorpe, just a little bit further down the coast, more strange lights. Okay, and this article, December 2011, latest UFO sighting off Mablethorpe coast fuels talk of extraterrestrial life. All right, now I actually interviewed a few of these UFO witnesses when I was doing my investigation. This is Eric Goring, who was quoted in some of the press reports. Now, what he described was a glowing ball of light coming down to the sky, from the sky, extremely fast. He said at thousands of miles an hour, looping out, and then suddenly there's just a black triangle hovering there above him, right, with lights at the corners, completely silent, and would depart very, very fast with no noise. And we've had that before in several cases where people, they just see balls of light and then suddenly it's a black triangle. That's quite common with black triangle cases. A woman, and I was just going around these villages going into shops and asking if people had seen things. These aren't people who've contacted me. This woman who ran a shop in Holmfirth, she was a nighttime taxi driver, and she was driving along the same road near where Eric Goring lives, and she also described seeing a totally silent black triangle, and she said it hovered above her car, and then in a moment it disappeared at phenomenal speed, totally silent. Now, she was told by a friend when she reported this, oh, that'll be XYZ black project which they're flying out of Conisholm RAF base. Now, I don't believe that, because if you go to bases like Conisholm, you get plane spotters there, like train spotters. There's even a place where you can park up where people film all the military aircraft coming in and out. And I'm not aware of anyone reporting anything silent. Every aircraft coming out of there you've got to wear earmuffs if you're near it. They're not silent, right? So she's not seen something that's been flown from Conisholm. Otherwise, airplane spotters would immediately say, hey, they're flying silent triangles out of this military base. And I'm not saying whether she's seen an ET craft or a man-made craft. I'm saying she's seen a silent black triangle which is not being flown in and out of UK military bases, as has the other gentleman. Now, the next witness, again, it's all in the same area. This is a broad daylight sighting, right, of something completely different. This is a huge egg-shaped craft, and I actually believe that this is the thing that caused the damage to the turbine, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute.
From Holmfirth to Mablethorpe, and it was actually on Staleby Crossroads.
Holmfirth to Mablethorpe Road, okay.
Yes. And I came to court to it, and it's pretty blind because there's trees either side.
And were you heading towards Mablethorpe or back?
Yes, I was heading towards Mablethorpe.
Okay, so you're about two miles out of Holmfirth, heading towards Mablethorpe.
So I do that trip every single day.
Yeah.
And I do the school runs twice a day when my wife's not here. And the sunroof was down and everything. It's got a sunroof. I remember that really, really vividly. And I came round the corner, and my little girl was in the back, and she screamed. And the car in front of her stopped, and there was this grey egg-shaped thing, like a king, because I can say. And it was, say the road's 20 feet across, because it's a normal size A road. I would say it was 3 times wider than the road. What came to mind was a huge, I thought it was like a Westland Wessex helicopter. That's what came into my mind. Because they're like big bulbous thing. And it was stopped right above the road, and it was absolutely huge. Like it was bigger than a plane, you know, massive. And it was just moving forward about, I'd say about 1 mile an hour.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it just shot back the opposite direction, where it came, the same way it came, but you know, like sort of
so which direction did it come from?
The east.
So from the
field.
So from the sea, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it shot back towards the sea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you managed to pin down a date yet?
The date, I have no idea.
But you know, you said it was September, yeah?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was September, because that's the month that I had that black FTO.
Right. Right.
That's the only way I can really pinpoint it.
But you think was it a school day because you'd pick your kids up or not?
It was definitely 100% a school day.
Okay.
It was only 20 feet above the road, and it was bigger than the road and the tree. It was massive. I can't put it into scale. So if it's next to a car, if it was like next to a car, it would be the size of 10 double-decker buses.
Right.
That big.
So it was 3 times the width of the road, you said?
Yes, I'd say, yeah. It was like the only thing you could see when you looked up. You couldn't see sky around it.
Okay.
And that was freaky because the way it shot back, it was instant, and my girl was crying her eyes out. And my boy was, oh my God, what was that? What was that?
And
So I
no
drew-
noise at all?
Pardon?
No noise at all?
Absolutely no noise. The only thing that was weird, the only thing that was weird, I could taste. It was like, I could taste, it sounds stupid, I'm like an idiot. I could taste electric. You can like,
Yeah.
you know when you put an old PP3 battery on your tongue?
Yeah.
Taste that.
And you said you could smell like a
Yeah.
transformer type smell.
Right, now, some people would say, oh, well, he's seen an airship, okay? Now, I'm open to that, but he said it departed at phenomenal speed, and what he was clearly reporting there is the thing is electrically charged. Now, just go back to what the guy said about the thing at Connor's home. Now, I know from my background in electrical engineering, if you've got a large object which is charged, right, and it comes down towards the ground, as it gets nearer to the ground, the electric field between the charged object and the ground increases. Okay, you've got more volts per centimeter. And it'll come to a point where it will reach the breakdown voltage of air, and you will then get like a lightning strike going down to the ground. And you know, we're all familiar with this Nikola Tesla stuff that he's done, where you have these tentacle type things coming down to the ground. And what did our witness say in the local newspaper? It was like tentacle things coming down to the ground. That's why I think it's possible. What this chap has seen is the thing that's knocked the wind turbine blade off. And if we can just hypothesize a bit further, if you read books such as Secrets of Anti-Gravity by Dr. Paul Laviolette, and all of the alleged anti-gravity propulsion systems that they may have developed, most of them involve high voltage electricity. So let's just hypothesize that this craft has got some sort of anti-gravity propulsion system, right? In other words, it can generate its own gravity, right? In other words, say you were standing underneath it, you might feel a pull going up towards it, or a push, okay? Then that would explain possibly why the blade's gone missing, because the blades just got sucked up into the field, whatever field the craft is generating. It's a hypothesis, but it's based on evidence.